Chapter 1. The autumn wind carried the scent of burning leaves through Riverside Commons. But tonight, it would carry something else entirely. The acrid smell of regret and the bitter taste of consequences yet to come. 5 students stood in the orange glow of streetlights, their voices raised not in celebration, but in fury. This town clings to the past while destroying our tomorrow, Vanessa Torres hissed, her dark hair whipping across her face as she gestured toward the monument that had stood sentinel since 1962. Look at their precious guardian, standing there judging us while they vote to close our campus. The guardian angel rose 15 feet from its granite pedestal. Her bronze wings spread wide. Her stone face, weathered by decades of rain and wind, still held an expression of infinite compassion. Tonight, that compassion will be tested. "It's just metal and stone," Derek Wong said, though his voice held less conviction than his words. The red gas can felt heavy in his hands, heavier than it should have been. Madison Pierce had her phone out already, streaming to her followers. "We're here to show this town what real change looks like," she announced to the camera, her voice artificially bright. "Time to tear down the old and make way for the new." Tyler Sanchez set up his professional streaming equipment, the kind he used for tech review videos. This would get more views than anything he'd ever posted. Going live in 3. Rachel Montgomery was already moving to the music playing from her portable speaker, her movements sharp and aggressive. "Let's give them a show they'll never forget." Only Gabriel Morales, a local student who'd grown up seeing this monument every day of his life, stood apart from the group. "Guys, this isn't right," he called out. "You don't know what this means to people here." "Maya Bola, your grandmother needs to join the 21st century," Vanessa cut him off, snatching the lighter from her pocket. The gasoline poured from Derek's can in a steady stream, soaking into the granite base, pooling on the ground. The fumes rose, making them all dizzy. Or maybe that was just the adrenaline. "Say goodbye to your precious angel." Vanessa laughed, but the sound was hollow, forced. She flicked the Zippo. The flame caught instantly, racing up the bronze in tongues of orange and blue. The paint began to bubble and peel. The monument's serene expression seemed to shift in the dancing light, or perhaps that was just the heat waves distorting their vision. Madison danced closer to the flames, Rachel recording her every move. "This is what liberation looks like," she shouted over the crackling fire. But as the flames rose higher, something changed. The laughter died in their throats. The painted eyes of the monument, softened by heat, seemed to weep tears of molten color. And for just a moment, just one impossible moment, they all heard it. A sound like crying, like mourning, like a mother watching her children destroy themselves. Gabriel was the first to step back, his hands pressed to his ears. But the sound wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from within, from some place in their souls they'd forgotten existed. The fire burned for hours, but the real burning had only just begun. Chapter 2. The monument's history. To understand what the students had done, you had to know the story of why the monument stood there at all. December 8, 1962. The Riverside Textile Factory fire. 47 workers went down that Tuesday morning when the main stairwell collapsed during the blaze. Only 3 came back out alive. For 5 days, the families of Riverside gathered in the Commons, holding vigil. They prayed in English and Spanish, in Vietnamese and Portuguese, all the languages that had built this small industrial town. Rosa Morales, Gabriel's great-grandmother, led them in prayer each hour, her voice never faltering, even as hope grew thin. On the 5th night, when the rescue teams had all but given up, Jennifer Park emerged from the smoking ruins. She was the youngest of the trapped workers, barely 19, and she was delirious from smoke inhalation and trauma. But her story never changed. Not in the 61 years that followed. Not even on her deathbed last winter. She walked through the flames, she told them, her eyes wide with wonder and fear. Through the fire and falling debris like it was nothing. A woman with bronze wings glowing like captured sunlight. She took my hand and led me to a window I'd never seen before, showed me a fire escape hidden by the smoke. "Go now," she told me. Others are waiting. And then she was gone. The families didn't need to be told who she was. They've been calling on guardian angels for 5 days. By spring of 1963, they'd raised enough money for the monument. It wasn't fancy. Local sculptor David Chun carved it from granite and cast the bronze wings himself, working by candlelight in his unheated garage through the winter months. But when they unveiled it on Memorial Day in 1963, something settled over Riverside. A sense of protection, of presence. The monument weathered storms that flattened other towns. During the chemical spill of 1982, when toxic clouds spread for miles, the fumes stopped just feet from her pedestal. In the tornado of 1996, debris was lifted and set down gently in the commons, families inside unharmed, while the funnel seemed to split and pass around the monument on either side. People began leaving flowers, lighting candles, whispering prayers. Not worship. The townspeople were careful about that, but reverence, gratitude, love. The monument became the heart of Riverside. Every major decision, every town meeting, every moment of crisis brought people to the commons. When the factory finally closed in 1994, they held the memorial service at her feet. When the high school won the state championship in 2015, they celebrated in her shadow. When COVID hit in 2020, they strung lights around her like a beacon of hope. She was more than bronze and granite. She was their guardian, their protector, their reminder that some things endure, until 5 angry students decided she was just metal. Chapter 3. The morning after brought an unnatural quiet to Riverside Commons, the kind of silence that comes after something sacred has been broken. The fire department had extinguished the flames by dawn, but the damage was complete. The monument's face was blackened and cracked, her bronze wings scorched to bare metal. Her outstretched hands had melted away entirely. Only her eyes remained intact, 2 spots of faded paint that seemed to follow you as you walked around the ruined pedestal. The students woke in their dorms and apartments with hangovers that had nothing to do with alcohol. They'd celebrated their victory the night before with cheap beer and cheaper bravado. But now, in the gray morning light streaming through their windows, something felt wrong. Vanessa was the first to notice. She reached for her phone to check the video Madison had posted, but the screen remained black no matter how many times she pressed the power button. The device wasn't dead. It was warm to the touch, almost hot, but it wouldn't turn on. Across town, Derek was having the same problem. His phone, his laptop, his tablet. Nothing with a screen would work. He called the tech support line from his landline, but after 20 minutes on hold, he gave up. There were more important things to worry about, like the smell. It had started the moment he opened his eyes. Gasoline fumes so strong they made his eyes water. But there was no gas kin in his apartment, no source for the smell. He'd showered twice, brushed his teeth until his gums bled, even changed his sheets. The smell remained, clinging to him like guilt made manifest. Madison found that her video had vanished from every platform. Not deleted, vanished, as if it had never existed. Her followers swore they'd never seen it. The streaming platforms had no record of it. Even her own phone showed no evidence that she'd ever been in the Commons that night. But she remembered. They all remembered. Tyler's equipment, thousands of dollars worth of cameras and streaming gear, had simply stopped working. Everything powered on, all the lights blinked, but no image would record. No sound would capture. It was as if reality itself was refusing to be documented in his presence. Rachel couldn't listen to music anymore. Every song, regardless of genre or platform, would fade after a few seconds into the same haunting melody. A hymn she didn't recognize, sung by a voice so beautiful it made her weep, and so sad it made her want to disappear. Only Gabriel seemed unaffected, but he felt the weight of what had happened more than any of them. He'd grown up with stories of the monument's power, had seen his grandmother leave flowers at her feet every week for 20 years. He tried to stop them, but not hard enough. Not when it mattered. 3 days after the burning, Vanessa Torres stopped being able to see her own reflection. Chapter 4. Vanessa's reckoning had started small, a glitch in her bathroom mirror that she blamed on poor lighting. But by Thursday, She couldn't see herself in any reflective surface. Not mirrors, not windows, not the screen of her finally working phone. Everyone else appeared normally, but where Vanessa should have been, there was only empty space. She tried to convince herself it was psychological, guilt manifesting as self-erasure. But Thursday night, alone in her dorm room, she learned the truth was far stranger. The bathroom light flickered out while she was washing her face. In the darkness, she heard water dripping. Not from the faucet she just turned off, but from somewhere else, somewhere above her. A bronze glow began to emanate from behind her, reflected in the mirror she couldn't see herself in. Slowly, she turned around. The guardian angel stood in her tiny dorm bathroom, exactly as she had been before the fire. Bronze wings perfect and gleaming, face full of infinite compassion and infinite sorrow. The light came from within her, soft and warm, like moonlight through stained glass. But she was crying, tears of real water that fell to the tile floor with soft, rhythmic drops. "Would you laugh if it were your mother burning?" The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, gentle as a lullaby, terrible as judgment. Vanessa tried to speak, but her voice had abandoned her. She tried to move, but her feet were rooted to the floor. She could only stand there, facing the presence she had mocked, feeling something inside her chest crack and crumble like heated metal. "You lit the fire that burned away 61 years of love," the angel said, her tears falling steadily. "Now you burn away from yourself, one reflection at a time, until you remember who you truly are." The vision faded, but the smell remained. Not gasoline anymore, but smoke. Constant, clinging smoke that she tasted with every breath, that reminded her with every inhalation of the moment she'd chosen destruction over reverence. She stopped going to classes, stopped eating in the cafeteria, where people might notice her missing reflection in the serving line glass, stopped living in any meaningful way, haunted by the image of those tears falling in her bathroom and the question that echoed in her dreams. "Would you laugh if it were your mother burning?" The weight of that question pressed down on her like a physical thing, making every breath difficult, making existence painful, making every moment a reminder of the sacred thing she destroyed for nothing more than theatrical anger and a moment of feeling powerful. She had wanted to tear down symbols of the past. Instead, she had torn down a piece of her own soul. Chapter 5. Derek's imprisonment. Derek Wan's car had always been a sanctuary. A 2019 Toyota Corolla he'd bought himself, detailed every weekend, the one place in the world that was entirely his, until the night it became his prison. He was driving home from his evening shift at the campus library when the rain started. Not unusual for November, but this was different. Heavy, driving rain that seemed to come from all directions at once. He pulled into the parking lot of a 24-hour diner to wait out. That's when the doors stopped working. Not mechanically. The handles moved. The locks clicked. Everything functioned perfectly. But the doors wouldn't open. It was as if they were sealed shut by some invisible force. The windows wouldn't roll down either, despite the electrical systems working normally. Panic set in quickly. Derek pounded on the glass, honked the horn, flashed the lights, but the diner was empty, the parking lot deserted, and the rain was getting heavier. Through the fogged windshield, blurred by condensation and rainfall, he saw her. A figure with bronze wings walking across the parking lot, barefoot on the wet asphalt. She moved slowly, deliberately, as if the driving rain were nothing more than a gentle mist. As she drew closer, Derek could see that she cast no reflection in the puddles beneath her feet. She stopped directly in front of his car, and despite the fogged glass and heavy rain, he could see her face clearly. The same face that had gazed down protectively from the monument, now marked with profound sadness. 3 gentle knocks on his windshield. "Knock, knock, knock. You fed the fire." Her voice came clearly through the sealed car, as if she was sitting in the passenger seat beside him. "Now live inside it." The interior of the car began to fill with the smell of gasoline, so strong it burned his nostrils and throat. But there was something else, the sound of crackling flames growing louder and more real with each second. Derek looked down to see tongues of fire licking at his shoes, climbing up the car seats, dancing across the dashboard. But he felt no heat, only the terror of being trapped in his own private hell. "Please," he whispered, the first prayer he'd spoken since childhood. "I am sorry. I'm so sorry." The flames vanished. The rain stopped. The doors clicked open. But every night after that, when Dare tried to sleep, he found himself back in that car, back in the rain, back watching her walk across the parking lot to deliver her terrible, gentle justice. And every morning, he woke with the taste of gasoline in his mouth and the sound of her knocks echoing in his ears. Knock, knock, knock. A reminder that some debts can't be paid with apologies alone. Chapter 6. Madison's silence. Madison Pierce had built her entire identity around being heard. 18,000 followers on TikTok, 26,000 on Instagram. A voice that could cut through any crowd, any conversation, any room, until the night her voice simply stopped mattering. It started with her computer. She'd sit down to edit videos, and the keyboard would begin typing on its own. Restore what you took, over and over, filling document after document with the same 4 words until she'd slam the laptop shut in frustration. But the real horror was subtler and far more devastating. People stopped listening to her. Not couldn't hear her, she wasn't mute, but her words seemed to slide off people like water off glass. She'd speak, and conversations would continue around her, as if she hadn't said anything at all. She'd raise her voice, and people would look through her, past her, anywhere but at her. At first she thought it was coincidence, then paranoia, then desperation. She tried everything. New haircuts, brighter clothes, more outrageous opinions. She screamed in the middle of the library, danced naked through the quad at midnight, even set a small trash can on fire behind the science building. Nothing. No reaction, no recognition, no acknowledgement that she existed at all. A week after the burning, Madison found herself back in Riverside Commons at 3 o'clock in the morning, standing where the monument had been. The blackened pedestal looked like a gravestone in the moonlight. "Please," she whispered to the empty air. "I just wanted to be heard. I just wanted to matter." The response came not as a voice, but as a memory that wasn't her own. She was 6 years old, lost in a museum during a school field trip, crying for her teacher in the vast, echoing space. But in this memory that belonged to someone else, a woman with bronze wings knelt beside her, took her small hands, and said, "You are heard, little one. You have always been heard, but sometimes we must be quiet to listen to the love that surrounds us." Madison fell to her knees on the cold concrete, finally understanding. She'd had a voice all along, but she'd used it to tear down instead of build up, to mock instead of comfort, to perform instead of connect. The typing on her computer changed that night. Instead of "restore what you took," it began composing apologies, letters to every person she'd hurt with her words, every cause she'd mocked for views, every sacred thing she'd trampled for attention. She'd been given back her voice, but only to use it for healing. And slowly, painfully, she began to write the words that actually mattered. Chapter 7. Tyler's revelation. Tyler Sanchez had made a living out of documenting his life. Gaming streams, daily vlogs, tech reviews, every moment captured, edited, uploaded for his modest but loyal following. Technology was his language. Content was his currency, and going viral was his religion, until the night his screen started showing him things that were never filmed. It began with his streaming setup automatically powering on at 3:33 a.m. every night. He disabled every timer, unplugged every device, even thrown circuit breakers. But somehow the monitors would flicker to life with the precision of an atomic clock. The first night, they showed the original footage, shaky phone video of the monument burning, his professional cameras capturing every angle of destruction. But as the nights passed, the footage began to change. New scenes appeared. Close-ups of the guardian angel's face before the fire started, her bronze eyes seeming to look directly into the camera with an expression of foreknowledge and forgiveness. Shots from impossible angles, from inside the flames, from beneath the monument, from perspectives that should have been blocked by buildings or trees. But the most disturbing addition was the voice. Not Madison's commentary or the students' laughter, but a whisper that ran underneath everything. You wanted to be seen. Now I see you. Tyler tried to delete the files, but they regenerated instantly. He replaced his hard drives, but the videos appeared on the new equipment before he'd even finished the installation. He bought an entirely new computer system, but the first thing that appeared on the fresh monitors was that same footage, now showing details he'd never noticed before. In one frame, barely visible in the background, stood a figure with bronze wings watching from the edge of the commons. In another, a face appeared in the flames themselves, not burning, but present, witnessing. And in every shot, that voice whispered the same words. The technical term was impossible data persistence. But Tyler knew better. This wasn't a glitch or virus. This was judgment rendered in pixels and frames. Consequence delivered through the very medium he'd used to document destruction. On the 10th night, something new appeared on his screens. Instead of the burning, he saw himself as a child, maybe 8 years old, kneeling in his bedroom with hands pressed together in prayer. It was a memory he'd forgotten, a night when his little brother had been sick with appendicitis, and he'd prayed to anyone who would listen to make him better. The whisper changed. You wanted to be seen because you remember being loved. Remember again. His brother had recovered. And somewhere in his childhood faith, buried under years of cynicism and performance, Tyler began to remember what it felt like to believe in something greater than views and likes and digital validation. Chapter 8. Rachel's transformation. Rachel Montgomery had always danced. Ballet at 5, jazz at 8, hip-hop in middle school, contemporary in high school, and now at 21, she could move to any rhythm, embody any emotion, tell any story with her body in motion, until music itself turned against her. The change was subtle at first. Songs would fade out earlier than they should, leaving her mid-routine in awkward silence. Beats would shift unexpectedly, throwing off her timing. But by the end of the first week, any music she tried to dance to would dissolve into the same haunting melody, a hymn she'd never heard but somehow recognized, sung by voices that seemed to come from another century. It was beautiful and terrible, this music that followed her everywhere. Beautiful because it touched something deep in her soul. Terrible because it made her remember things she'd tried to forget. Like the little girl she'd been, dragging her mother to church every Sunday. Not for God or faith or tradition, but because she loved to watch the way candlelight flickered during evening prayers, the way the stained glass windows painted rainbow patterns on the walls, the way the choir director's robes moved when she conducted, like dancing in slow motion. She danced in church once during a children's Easter pageant. She was supposed to be an angel, but she'd improvised, spinning and leaping with pure joy, and the congregation had wept at the sight of such innocent reverence, made manifest in movement. When she lost that joy, when had dancing become performance instead of prayer? The hymn that haunted her music grew stronger each night, until finally, alone in the studio at 2 a.m., Rachel stopped fighting it. She let the melody fill her. Let her body respond, not with the sharp, aggressive movements she'd used in the Commons, but with something older, deeper, more honest. She danced her regret. She danced her childhood faith. She danced her sorrow for what she'd destroyed and her hope for what might be rebuilt. And as she danced, she wasn't alone. A presence filled the studio, warm, maternal, infinitely patient. Not visible, not tangible, but unmistakably there, watching, waiting, forgiving. Dance now. Came the voice she'd been hearing in her dreams at night. But now it wasn't a command. It was an invitation. Rachel sank to her knees, tears streaming down her face. And for the first time since childhood, she prayed with her whole body, her whole heart, her whole broken and beautiful soul. The music changed. The hymn remained. But now it was accompanied by something new. The sound of healing, of grace, of love that endures even when the beloved turns away. She had been given back her art, but only to use it for something greater than herself. Chapter 9. Gabriel's burden and the town's division. Gabriel Morales hadn't slept properly since the burning. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the flames. Every time he opened them, he saw the accusation in his neighbors' faces. He'd tried to stop it, but not hard enough. He'd spoken up, but not loud enough. He'd stood apart, but not far enough away to avoid complicity. The weight of collective guilt pressed down on Riverside like a physical thing. The town that had always pulled together in crisis was fracturing along lines of faith and doubt, tradition and progress, forgiveness and judgment. Some called for the students to be arrested. Others said it was just property damage, that people were overreacting. The divide ran through families, friendships, the very soul of the community. Gabriel's grandmother, Rosa Morales, had been one of the families who'd raised money for the original monument. At 94, she was the last living link to that sacred history. And watching her weep over the destruction was more than Gabriel could bear. 2 weeks after the burning, on a gray Sunday morning when most of the town was either at church or sleeping off Saturday night, Gabriel walked alone to Riverside Commons. The pedestal looked smaller in daylight, diminished by its emptiness. Someone had tried to clean off the soot, but ghostly stains remained, outlining where the monument had stood for nearly 7 decades. Flowers had been left, wilted roses, plastic carnations, hand-picked wildflowers from children who didn't understand why the pretty angel was gone. Gabriel knelt on the cold concrete, something he hadn't done since he was a child, dragged to Mass by his grandmother. The words came haltingly, rusty from disuse. "I'm sorry," he whispered, "not just for what they did, but for what I didn't do. I could have stopped it. I should have stopped it. I was afraid of being laughed at, afraid of standing out, afraid of being the weird religious kid. And because of my fear, your monument was burned down." The wind picked up, scattering the dead leaves around the commons in tiny whirlwinds. Gabriel shivered and started to stand, but a weight on his shoulders stopped him. Not heavy, but warm. Too warm for the November morning. He turned slowly, heart hammering, and saw her. Not glowing, not floating, not surrounded by impossible light or accompanied by heavenly choirs. She stood beside him as simply and naturally as if she'd always been there, her bronze wings moving gently in the wind, her face kind and infinitely sad. "You were quiet, but not silent," she said, her voice carrying the slight accent of his grandmother's generation. "That matters." Chapter 10. The call to rebuild. Gabriel's grandmother had always said that the guardian angel appeared to those who needed her most. But looking at her now, Gabriel realized he'd had it backwards. She appeared to those who needed to serve her most. "What do I do?" he asked. She smiled, and for a moment, the gray morning felt touched by spring. "What you've always done. You speak when others are silent. You stand when others kneel. You remember when others forget. But they won't listen to me. I'm nobody special. I'm not a priest or a leader or you're Gabriel Morales, great-grandson of Rosa Morales, who led the prayers that saved Jennifer Park. You carry their faith in your blood and their courage in your heart. That makes you special enough." She began to fade, becoming translucent in the morning light, but her voice remained clear. "Tell them forgiveness is not about forgetting. Tell them mercy is not about avoiding consequences. Tell them love is not about being comfortable." And then she was gone, leaving only the warmth on his shoulder and a sense of purpose Gabriel had never felt before. 3 weeks after his encounter with the guardian angel, Gabriel did something he'd never imagined himself capable of. He called a meeting, not through official channels. The town council was still too divided, the university administration too worried about liability. Instead, he went door to door the way his great-grandmother had when she'd organized the vigil for the factory fire victims. He talked to the grieving Catholics and the angry secularists, to the students and the townspeople, to anyone who would listen. "We need to face this together," he told them. What happened in the Commons wasn't just about a monument or campus funding or religious freedom. It was about us, about who we are when we think no one's watching, about what we do when we're angry and afraid. The meeting was held in the high school gymnasium, neutral ground that belonged neither to church nor campus. 73 people showed up, which was more than Gabriel had dared hope for and fewer than the town needed. The 5 students sat in the front row, not by choice, but because Gabriel had asked them to. They looked fragile in the harsh fluorescent light, nothing like the bold revolutionaries who'd live-streamed destruction just a month before. Gabriel stood at the podium, his prepared speech crumpled in his sweating palm. Instead, he spoke from the heart. I was there that night. I watched them burn the monument, and I didn't stop them. Not really. I said a few words, but I didn't put my body between them and the fire. Chapter 11. Confession and Commitment. I didn't call for help. I didn't do what my great-grandmother would have done, what any of the families who built that monument would have done. I was a coward, and because I was a coward, something sacred was lost. But maybe that loss can teach us something. He looked at the students, seeing his own shame reflected in their faces. They were angry about the campus closure. We're all angry about something. But anger without wisdom is just destruction. And destruction without consequence is just chaos. These 5 students have been living with the consequences of their choices for a month now. I can see it in them. They've been changed by what they did in ways I don't think any of us can fully understand. The question is, what do we do with that change? An elderly woman in the 3rd row raised her hand. Gabriel recognized her as Mrs. Park, Jennifer's daughter. What do you propose, young man? Gabriel took a deep breath. I propose we rebuild. Not just the monument, but the community that was broken when it burned. I propose we let these students help with the rebuilding, not as punishment, but as healing. I propose we talk to each other instead of about each other. And I propose we remember that forgiveness isn't about pretending things never happened. It's about choosing to move forward together despite what happened. Murmurs rippled through the gymnasium, some approving, some skeptical, all uncertain. It was Vanessa who stood first, her voice barely above a whisper. I lit the fire. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want to help rebuild what I destroyed. If you'll let me. One by one, the other 4 students stood. Derek offered to organize a fundraising drive. Madison volunteered to document the rebuilding process, not for social media, but for the town archives. Tyler said he'd coordinate with local artists and craftspeople. Rachel proposed a dedication ceremony that would honor both the old monument and the new. The vote wasn't unanimous. Some people left without speaking. Others spoke without agreeing. But 57 of the 73 people present agreed to the rebuilding plan, and more importantly, they agreed to work together on it. It was a beginning. Over the following months, something remarkable happened in Riverside. The 5 students who had burned the monument became its most dedicated restorers. They worked not out of obligation, but out of genuine transformation. Vanessa could finally see her reflection again, but the face looking back at her was different, older somehow, marked by understanding that suffering brings. Derek no longer woke with gasoline in his mouth, but he never forgot the taste. Madison's voice returned to her, but she used it now to build up rather than tear down. Chapter 12. Restoration and Redemption. The new monument was not identical to the old one. It couldn't be. David Chun, the sculptor who had created the original, had died in 1995, and his techniques and materials were lost to time. But the town found another artist, Elena Vasquez, a sculptor from the state capital who specialized in sacred art and understood both the technical and spiritual challenges of the project. The fundraising took 4 months, not just from Riverside, but from surrounding communities from the university, even from strangers who'd heard the story and felt moved to contribute. The 5 students worked tirelessly, organizing bake sales and car washes, reaching out to local businesses, applying for grants from arts foundations and religious organizations. Vanessa discovered she had a talent for grant writing, spending hours crafting applications that told the story of destruction and redemption with power that came from lived experience. Derek organized a benefit concert featuring local bands, managing logistics with an efficiency he'd never shown for anything else. Madison interviewed community members, collecting oral histories about what the monument had meant to them, creating an archive of memory that would outlast any physical structure. Tyler collaborated with Elena Vasquez, documenting every stage of the creative process and learning about the spiritual significance of sacred art. Rachel worked with the high school music and drama departments, developing a dedication ceremony that would honor the past while celebrating renewal. Gabriel coordinated everything, becoming the bridge between old Riverside and new, between the wounded and the healing, between the sacred and the secular. His grandmother, Rosa Morales, became his unofficial advisor, sharing stories about the original monument that helped guide the recreation process. The new guardian angel was carved from the same granite as her predecessor, but Elena Vasquez incorporated elements that reflected the town's growth and diversity since 1962. Her wings bore subtle patterns inspired by the various cultures now calling Riverside home. Her face, while maintaining the traditional features of angelic iconography, somehow seemed to reflect the faces of all the families who had prayed at her feet over the decades. But the most significant change was her hands. Instead of being outstretched in protection, they were cupped as if holding something precious, or perhaps offering to receive something broken, ready to make it whole. The dedication ceremony was held on Memorial Day, exactly 1 year after the burning. The Commons was packed with people, not just from Riverside, but from communities throughout the region. Father Rodriguez from St. Catherine's offered a blessing, but so did Pastor Williams from First Baptist, Rabbi Cohen from the Reformed Temple in the next county, and Imam Hassan from the Islamic Center in the state capital.